Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1, The Unveiling of Hatfield Manor. Hercule Poirot stepped lightly from the handsome cab into the damp chill of the autumn afternoon. A fine drizzle hung in the air, blurring the outlines of the imposing wrought iron gates before him. Beyond, Hatfield Manor rose like a somber sentinel against the slate-grey sky, its mullioned windows dark and shuttered, its aged stone walls slick with moisture. Poirot straightened his impeccable dark grey overcoat, his small moustaches bristling ever so slightly at the prospect of a new puzzle. He carried in his gloved hand a single, crisply folded letter. The handwriting was neat, with a steady slant and no curious flourishes, Lord Ellington's own. It read simply, Monsieur Poirot. A most troubling matter has arisen at Hatfield Manor. Your discretion and intellect are urgently required. Please arrive without delay. Edward, Lord Ellington. With a discreet adjustment of his brimmed hat, Poirot summoned the footman standing at the great oak door. The man, tall, lean, and rather nervous of bearing, held open the door, revealing a dimly lit hall warmed by a dying fire in a colossal stone hearth. The footman's uniform was immaculate, yet Poirot noted the crease in his polished trousers had been hastily recreased that morning, perhaps in anxious anticipation of his master's strange summons. Monsieur, Lord Ellington awaits you in the library, the footman intoned, bowing low. Shall I announce you? Ah, OUI, replied Poirot, his refined French accent lacing the words. But first, might I have your name? James, Sir, James Harrington, at your service. Merci, James. Poirot offered a courteous nod. If you would be so kind as to show me briefly the route to my quarters, I may freshen myself before meeting Lord Ellington. James hesitated. Of course, sir. Your rooms are reserved on the west wing, second floor. Follow me, if you please. As they walked into the hushed corridors, Poirot's keen eyes took in every trifling detail. The corridor's polished oak paneling gleamed faintly, no dust lay upon it. At a corner, a solitary boot print is marked by fresh garden mud, marred and otherwise pristine tile. Poirot paused, leaning forward to examine the print's shape and depth. It was small, perhaps a woman's, and the heel was that of a common riding boot, not the heavier leather of a footman's. Poirot tucked the observation away in that well-ordered mind of his, assuring himself it would prove of use. In the guest suite, Poirot's valet, Georges, awaited him. The valet bowed, presenting a silver-rimmed shaving mirror and a bowl of warm water. Monsieur, I thought you might like to wash away the journey, no? His French was sharper than Poirot's own. Merci, Georges, said Poirot, removing his gloves with deliberate care. Would you mind also procuring a cup of tea from the kitchen? I find it aids the little grey cells. Certainly, monsieur, Georges replied, vanishing as swiftly as he had appeared. Poirot allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. The corridors held an atmosphere of tense expectation, as though the very walls of Hatfield Manor were straining to withhold their secrets. Refreshed, he descended to the library. The tall bookcases that lined the walls were heavy with leather-bound volumes whose gilt lettering shone in the glow of a single chandelier. A deep pile carpet cushioned each footstep. Behind an imposing mahogany desk sat Lord Edward Ellington, a gentleman whose once dark hair was now silver at the temples, his aquiline nose and high cheekbones lending him an aristocratic dignity. Yet today, those features were etched with worry. Ah, Monsieur Poirot, Lord Ellington greeted, rising stiffly. He held out a hand, which Poirot shook lightly. Thank you for coming so promptly. Mon plaisir, my lord, Poirot replied, seating himself in a high-backed chair opposite the desk. He unfolded the letter once more, laying it on the desk alongside the silver blotter. You did not specify the nature of your trouble in your letter, my lord. Perhaps you will share it with me now. Lord Ellington cleared his throat. It is my solicitor, Mr. Oliver Marks. This morning he was found dead in my library. Poirot's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Good heavens! And this was discovered when? At first light, by James, the footman. He came to fetch Mr. Marks for breakfast. Found him slumped across the desk. No sign of forced entry, the windows were locked, the door bolted from within. Poirot leaned forward, his gaze drifting to the desk itself. The blotter lay beside a bronze paperweight, a single ink bottle had toppled, its contents seeping onto the blotter's edge. May I inspect the scene, my lord? By all means. I have preserved the room just as it was found. Rising, Poirot moved closer to the desk. He noted the angle of the paperweight, its highly polished surface reflecting the glow of the chandelier. A smear of red, subtly darker than the polished bronze, tarnished one side. Poirot extended a gloved finger, gently touching the stain. His eyes flickered to the inkwell. It lay shattered, yet the ink was clear, not blood. Curious. He next examined the blotter, which now bore a single torn page from an account book. The sheet was torn cleanly, almost surgically, and covered in hastily scribbled figures. Poirot slid the page into a clean envelope he carried in his coat pocket. This will require closer examination. He then crossed to the window. The latch was firmly secured, though the sill held a few drops of mud. He ran his finger across the sill, smudging a faint smear of damp earth. A shoe must have brushed here. Lord Ellington's eyebrows lifted. But the carpets were cleaned only yesterday, yet this mud is fresh. How did it get here? Poirot smiled thinly. That, my lord, is exactly the question. Whoever entered, or, indeed, left, this chamber did not choose the front entrance. He paused, looking around the room. Are there servants in the household with access to this floor? Only James and the housekeeper, Mrs. Fairchild. Neither reported hearing or seeing anything unusual last night. Very well. Poirot stepped back to the desk, placing a gloved hand lightly on the blotter. May I see Mr. Marks's personal effects? His pockets, in particular. Sometimes the hands reveal what the mouth conceals. Lord Ellington produced a small tray containing a pocket watch, a set of keys, and a silk handkerchief embroidered with initials. Poirot lifted each item thoughtfully. The watch was stopped at precisely 12:17 a.m. Poirot's eyes flicked to the grand clock above the fireplace. It too had halted at the same moment. Curious that time, my lord. These clocks seldom fail simultaneously unless by design. As the afternoon waned, Poirot made a small rough sketch of the room's layout and noted the position of each object, the paperweight, the ink bottle, the torn ledger page, and the mud-spotted sill. Finally, he looked up. I shall require the names and whereabouts of everyone who had cause to see Mr. Marks late last evening, friends, colleagues, or otherwise. Lord Ellington nodded, a shadow of relief crossing his face. I will fetch you the list at once. Monsieur Poirot, your reputation for meticulous reasoning and observation is well justified. I feel already that this dreadful affair may be resolved. Poirot rose, brushing invisible dust from his coat. Patience, my lord. The facts, like the pieces of a jigsaw, will reveal themselves in due course. The little grey cells must be given time to work. With that, he straightened his brimmed hat, bowed, and withdrew from the library. The corridor beyond awaited, its stillness bearing witness to the enigma that had descended upon Hatfield Manor. Poirot paused at the threshold, peering back at the closed door as if it might whisper its secrets. Then, with measured steps, he proceeded to lay the groundwork for what would doubtless prove an affair both intricate and perilous. The game, as he so elegantly put it, was afoot. Chapter 2, A Grim Discovery. The next morning dawned in reluctant shades of grey, as though even the sun hesitated to illuminate the tragedy within Hatfield Manor. After a restless night's sleep, Hercule Poirot descended the carpeted staircase into the grand corridor, his mind already at work on the puzzle before him. He paused momentarily by the window and observed the dew-laden lawn. A solitary gardener's spade lay abandoned on the edge of the rose-bed, its handle flecked with damp earth. Poirot made a mental note of this as he made his way to the library, summoned by Lord Ellington's hasty knock. The library door stood ajar. Poirot's gloved hand pushed it open gently, and he stepped inside. The room was in disarray. Heavy books lay scattered across the Persian rug, chairs had been pushed aside, one even toppled. Oil lamps remained alight, casting a wavering glow that danced across dark mahogany shelves. In the centre, slumped over the writing desk, lay the limp figure of Mr. Oliver Marks, the family solicitor. His head rested upon a pool of dark crimson, the edges of which stained the polished wood in ragged, uneven lines. Poirot approached the body with calm precision. He noted the angle at which Mr. Marks's head had fallen, a slight tilt to the left, as though he had been taken by surprise. The collar of his crisp white shirt was undone, revealing a faint clue, 2 small pinpricks at the base of his throat. Poirot's moustaches twitched at the sight. He knelt and examined the wound under the lamplight, noting it was too clean, too consistent, to be a careless injury. It was the mark of someone who knew exactly where and how to strike. Standing, Poirot surveyed the desk's scattered contents. An open ledger lay face down, the last entry, a neat column of figures, was smeared by a single broad swipe of ink. A blotter lay on the floor, its felt backing bearing a dark impression of what looked like an inverted letter M. He retrieved a neighbour's calling card from the hearth, a visiting card for Captain Adrian Blackwood, dated the previous evening. Poirot placed it gently upon the desk as if returning a borrowed item. He wondered what business the military man had had with the solicitor so late at night. At the far end of the desk stood a porcelain inkwell, its stopper missing and ink seeping onto the blotter. Poirot lifted the stopper carefully, examining its base. There, almost imperceptible, was the faintest trace of blood. It glimmered, like a dark pearl, in the lamp's flicker. Poirot frowned. He carefully replaced the stopper, making sure not to disturb the loose inkwell. Every detail, he reminded himself, was a potential key to the solution. He turned his attention to the windows. All were shuttered from within, yet one pane bore a curious pattern of smudges and streaks. Poirot crossed swiftly and placed his palm against the glass. The smear of mud was damp still, as if it had been deposited only hours ago. Below, on the sill, he spotted a single, small footprint, no larger than a lady's slipper. He sketched its outline in the air with his gloved finger. "Someone entered, or exited, through here," he murmured. Poirot stood back, closing his eyes to reconstruct the scene. He listened, the distant ticking of the grand clock, the faint drip of condensation from the eaves, and the hush of the house waking from its early slumber. A pattern was forming in his mind, but he would need more information. He next examined the hearth, where ashes lay undisturbed save for the imprints of 2 card deck designs. They were clear and distinct, the Queen of Hearts and the 8 of Clubs. With a slight smile of recognition, Poirot pocketed the 2 charred cards, mindful that a burned object can reveal secrets its owner might so wish to destroy. Footsteps approached, and James Harrington, the footman, entered carrying a silver tray upon which stood a decanter of claret and 2 glasses. He halted abruptly upon seeing Poirot examining the body. "Monsieur," he faltered, I thought his lordship requested you here at once." "Yes, James," Poirot replied calmly. "Pray set the tray down and step back." He pointed to one of the glasses, which trembled slightly, its contents tinted a deep wine red. "Observe, James, the glass nearest the body bears a ring of droplets upon its rim." Poirot tapped the chair beside the desk. "Will you fetch me the second glass, please?" James did so, his hands shaking. Poirot compared the two rims under the lamplight. "The stain on this glass is fresh," he concluded, touching it lightly. "This, the other, has aged somewhat." "Which of you filled both glasses?" James hesitated. "Mrs. Fairchild, the housekeeper, sir. She brought them to the library for Mr. Marks and myself before I laid him to rest." His eyes flicked to the fallen solicitor. I was to join him for our customary early morning refreshment, sir, but I—" James's voice wavered, and Poirot held up a gloved hand. "Calm, my friend. I ask only that you recall accurately. When you entered the room, was Mr. Marks already seated?" James swallowed. "No, sir. I found him here, collapsed over the desk. The tray had been placed on the small side table. I didn't touch anything. I fetched Lady Ellington immediately." As James spoke, Poirot turned his gaze back to the desk and noticed something he had not observed before, a faded monogram embroidered upon the desk chair's burgundy upholstery. The letters, DR, were intertwined in a flourish of threadwork. DR. He repeated the initials silently, wondering if they might connect with the ledger entry he had glimpsed the previous evening. Poirot pressed his fingertips to the paper's edge where it lay under the blotter, lifting it gently. The torn page bore a horizontal tear, too straight to be made by errant tearing alone. It mirrored the tear in the ledger he had pocketed. He placed the page aside for later analysis. For now, he turned to James. "I shall require the names of all who called upon Mr. Marks last night, as well as anyone who might wish to harm him, for the sake of a list." James nodded, his face pale. "Yes, monsieur. I will write it down at once." Once James had departed, Poirot moved to the center of the room and closed his eyes. He breathed in the mingled scents of parchment, spilled claret, and a faint whiff of tobacco, Captain Blackwood's cheroot, perhaps. He calculated the time of death. The blood pool had not congealed fully, suggesting death within the last 4 or 5 hours. The stopped clocks both read 12:17 a.m. He recalled the pinpricks at the throat, a hat pin, perhaps, thrust with deliberate force. Poirot opened his eyes and surveyed the scene anew. He pictured Mr. Marks seated at the desk, counseled by someone with whom he might have argued heatedly. A struggle, overturned chair, flying cards, spilt ink. Then the blow, precise, delivered by someone with knowledge of anatomy. A sudden collapse. A second party arriving, a footman, perhaps, and discovering the body, summoning aid. All of which had been executed with the grace of premeditation. He knelt at the hearth and retrieved the Queen of Hearts, cradling it between thumb and forefinger. "Tell me your tale, little card." He then picked up the 8 of clubs and studied it in turn. "You, too." He tucked them both into an envelope. These burn tokens, he felt sure, would prove potent in revealing motives. Rising, Poirot left the envelope upon the desk, alongside the inkwell and blotter, arranging them as he had found them, save for the items he had removed. He walked to the door and turned. The library was a stage upon which the drama had unfolded. Now it awaited his scrutiny. Before departing, Poirot placed a single finger upon the brass handle and whispered to it, "Patience, my friend. The truth will emerge." Then, with measured steps, he retraced his path toward the hall, his mind already conceiving lines of inquiry and suspects to pursue. Out in the corridor, the hush of Hatfield Manor felt almost conspiratorial. Poirot paused by the boot print on the tile and drew his notebook. He sketched the sole's outline and labeled it Lady's Riding Boot. For he suspected a lady's foot had carried into the library the very clue that might break the case. He tapped the conceit within himself. In the labyrinth of minutiae, the murderer had left a trail laid out like crumbs. With the list of visitors soon to arrive from James, and the clues already in hand, the pinpricks, the mud smear, the burned cards, the engraved initials, Hercule Poirot felt the stirrings of anticipation. The game was afoot, and he alone possessed the acuity to navigate its twists and turns. As the damp morning light filtered through the manor's high windows, Poirot knew that the day's inquiries would lead him closer to the heart of a mystery as dark and tangled as the autumn mist beyond the gates. Chapter 3: The Circle of Suspects. By mid-morning the corridors of Hatfield Manor thrummed with discreet industry. The household staff scurried to and fro, silver trays glinting, slippers whispering over carpets, while Poirot remained ensconced in the drawing-room, contemplating his next move. He had studied the scene of Mr. Marks's death with meticulous care. Now it was time to turn his attention to the living. Lord Ellington joined him briefly to confirm that 4 individuals had been in the house late the previous evening: Lady Helena Ellington, Captain Adrian Blackwood, Miss Beatrice Caldwell, and the recent guest, Mr. Charles Wentworth. Poirot nodded graciously, rising to greet them. The drawing-room was scarcely large, but its walls were lined with fine tapestries that muted the outside world's chill. A low fire crackled in the hearth, and silver-framed portraits of Ellington ancestors gazed down imperiously. Poirot arranged for chairs in a semicircle before the hearth and invited each suspect to sit, one by one, beginning with Lady Helena Ellington. Lady Helena was tall and willowy, her dark hair swept back to reveal delicate features. She wore a tailored travelling suit of navy tweed, her posture impeccable. Yet as she sank into her chair, her gloved hands trembled ever so slightly around her fan. "Madam," Poirot began, "I thank you for coming. I hope you will forgive my necessity for inquiry. Pray tell me your movements last night, from dinner until retiring to your rooms." Lady Helena's gaze drifted momentarily to the fire. "I dined with my husband at 8 o'clock in the dining room. After dinner, I retired to the piano in the gallery to practice a new sonata I have been learning. I played for perhaps an hour, then returned here to collect a book before bed. I found Mr. Marks's door closed, and so I went to my rooms, which are just down the corridor." Poirot inclined his head. "And did you hear anything, voices, footsteps, upon your return?" She closed her eyes, recalling. "Only the wind, monsieur. The windows were rattling, but no voices. And I did not see anyone." Poirot's moustaches twitched. "Very good. Thank you, madam." He made a note in his small notebook: Lady Helena, no audible voices, claims presence alone. Next came Captain Adrian Blackwood, a broad-shouldered man in his early 30s, his dark uniform still bearing the faint scent of mollified leather. He declined a cup of tea with curt politeness. "Captain," Poirot said, seating him. "Your company accompanied you this morning. The bracing air of fall must suit you." Captain Blackwood gave a half-smile. "Indeed, Monsieur Poirot." He folded his hands. "I was in the library late. Mr. Marks and I had matters of business to discuss. It was nearly midnight when I left." "Business of what nature?" Poirot asked, steepling his fingers. The captain hesitated. "Personal, I suppose. I had hoped to secure a loan, though I confess now that it was imprudent." "Why so late?" Poirot pressed. "Surely such matters might have waited the morning." "I admit," the captain replied, "that discretion was necessary. My affairs are delicate." He shifted in his seat. "I had but a brief conversation with Mr. Marks. I left, locked the door behind me, and returned to the wing. I heard nothing unusual thereafter." Poirot's keen gaze lingered on him. "Do you own a cheroot, Captain?" The man's face went still. "Yes, but I smoked it earlier in the drawing-room." He swallowed. "I did not bring one to the library." Poirot made another note: Blackwood, loan meeting in library, secretive loan, denies cheroot on premises. Miss Beatrice Caldwell entered next, the governess, young and composed, her grey eyes observant behind a veil of dark lashes. She curtsied and took her seat, clutching a small notepad. "Miss Caldwell," Poirot said, You care for Lord Ellington's niece, do you not? She nodded. Madam's daughter lies in Hampshire with relatives, monsieur. I arrived only yesterday. Were you acquainted with Mr. Marks before this week? No, monsieur. I met him last evening at dinner. She glanced away, voice soft. He requested some clarifications regarding the child's future provisions. Poirot leaned forward. And you performed any tasks for him thereafter? She hesitated. I fetched some documents from his briefcase when he asked. He examined them here, she gestured to the desk, and then returned them. I left soon after, as I needed rest. Did you hear anything on your way out? Miss Caldwell shook her head. Only a faint rustle as if something had fallen, a book, perhaps. She bit her lip. I thought nothing of it at the time. Poirot noted, Caldwell, new to house, retrieved documents, heard rustle. Finally, Mr. Charles Wentworth arrived, his handsome face set in an easy charm. He bowed to Poirot and took the last chair, placing a top hat on his knee. Mr. Wentworth, Poirot said politely, you have been staying with us how long? 2 days, monsieur. I arrived Friday afternoon. He leaned back, confidently inspecting Poirot. I was in the drawing-room until close to 11, awaiting word from a business associate. I then took a stroll in the grounds, with permission, of course, to gather my thoughts. A stroll. Poirot's brow lifted. Across the gardens at that hour. His eyes narrowed. The house is my cousin's, it is natural I should walk its paths. He hesitated. I did not meet anyone. The lawns are illuminated by the moonlight, and I confided in the night air. Poirot tapped his notebook. And when did you retire? About 11:30, Wentworth said. I came in to find the house quiet. He offered a rakish smile. Hatfield Manor has a curious effect on one's nerves. With all for questioned, Poirot rose and stood before the hearth. He folded his hands behind his back, his moustaches quivering. I thank you all for your candor. Yet appearances can be deceptive, and I find some contradictions that warrant further discussion. He looked to Lady Helena. Madam, you claim to have been at the piano until nearly 10, yet Captain Blackwood says he left the library at midnight after your door was locked. Lady Helena's eyes widened. My door is 2 rooms from the library. I insisted it be locked at 9. And yet, Poirot continued, Miss Caldwell heard a rustle near the desk at, or about, or 11. That would indicate someone present at that time. Lady Helena swallowed. I cannot explain Miss Caldwell's impression. Poirot turned to Blackwood. Captain, you said you smoked no cheroot in the library. Yet I found the ash of a cheroot ember in the grate. He paused dramatically. Your habit is quite distinctive. The captain's jaw tightened. I must have forgotten. Ah, Poirot said, moving to Miss Caldwell. You fetched papers from Mr. Marks's briefcase. Did you observe the bronze paperweight? Miss Caldwell shook her head. No, I did not enter the room after he had begun his work. Curious. For Lady Helena claimed to see that very paperweight in its usual position at 9. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. And Mr. Marks himself would have been using that desk until midnight. Finally, Poirot faced Mr. Wentworth. And you, Mr. Wentworth, you saw no one in the grounds after 11, yet Lady Helena declared she heard footsteps outside her window at 10:30. She attributed them to the gardener. Mr. Wentworth's easy smile faltered. The gardener? I spoke with him earlier in the day, before dusk. Poirot nodded. Thank you. You may all go for now. I shall require further interviews tomorrow. As the suspects withdrew, Tension folded the quiet drawing room like a dark cloak. Poirot returned to the hearth, examining the empty chairs as though they were witnesses. He noted the slight impression of a slipper heel in the carpet where Lady Helena's favourite chair had rested, and a faint scent of lavender where Miss Caldwell had Saturday. On the mantelpiece lay a single matchstick, its head chewed. Poirot picked it up gingerly. "OUI, OUI," he murmured. The pieces move on the board. Each claims innocence, yet each reveals a fault line. I must discover which crack leads to the heart of this crime. He placed the matchstick in an envelope and sealed it. Outside, the autumn wind rattled the leaded panes. Inside, the suspects had departed into their separate worlds, each harboring secrets, each a possible murderer. But Poirot, with his little grey cells aflame, sensed that by morning the tangled threads would begin to unwind. The game continued, and he alone held the key to its next move. Chapter 4: Red Herrings and Half-Truths. The morning following his interviews found Hercule Poirot ensconced once more in the library at Hatfield Manor. The air was heavy with the scent of spilt claret and old leather. The autumn sun sliced through the leaded windows in slanted beams that danced across the Persian carpet. Poirot sat at the desk where Mr. Marks had died, hands clasped behind his head, little grey cells fully engaged. A single sheet of blotting paper lay before him, marked by ink and flecks of mud, silent clues waiting to be deciphered. He rose and went to the side table, where he had arranged the evidence into neat piles. First, the bronze paperweight, its subtle engraving of initials DR still concealed beneath masking wax. Second, the burned cards, Queen of Hearts and Eight of Clubs, wrapped in tissue. Third, the torn ledger page with hurried figures. Fourth, the motley collection of footprints, the small riding boot print on the windowsill, the faint sole mark by the hearth, and a partial impression of a larger, brogue-like heel outside the French doors. Poirot surveyed each in turn, murmuring to himself. The initials DR, he thought, pointed not to any household member interviewed so far. The ledger sheet bore the notation D.A.500 followed by a hastily scrawled date. Who was DR? The cards, he decided, were meant to mislead. Perhaps they signified a game of chance, a gambler's debt, but he was not so easily fooled. And the footprints, 3 very different pairs, spoke of at least 2, perhaps 3, people coming and going at odd hours. He laid out the evidence and summoned James Harrington, the footman, to bear witness to the arrangement. James entered, carrying a steaming tray of tea and toast. He bowed and set the tray aside. Poirot beckoned him over. "James, observe what I have here." He pointed to the paperweight. "Was there ever such an object belonging to any lady in this house?" James frowned. "Not that I know, sir. My lady's possessions are mostly silver or porcelain. That paperweight has always been his lordship's, or Mr. Marks's, perhaps. Yet the engraving is neither Ellington nor Marks," Poirot observed. "And certainly not of the housekeeper or governess." He tapped the burned cards. "These 2. They are out of place." James's brow creased. "They were not there before, monsieur. I burnt some unwanted papers in the hearth yesterday afternoon when preparing the fire." "Including these cards?" asked Poirot. James shook his head. "No, sir. I did not recognize those cards among the rubbish. They must have been placed there later." Poirot nodded. "Very good. And the ledger page?" "It is torn deliberately. Someone wished to conceal a record." James swallowed. "Mr. Marks's ledger was kept in his briefcase until this week, when he left it here to prepare some accounts." Poirot's moustaches twitched. "Accounts for whom?" James hesitated. "For Lady Helena, sir, concerning the estate funds." A flicker of interest crossed Poirot's face. He thanked James and dismissed him, motioning for the footman to remain in the corridor should he be needed again. Once alone, Poirot rose and paced the floor. He recalled the interviews, Lady Helena's claim of piano practice, Captain Blackwood's furtive loan request, Miss Caldwell's timid rustle, and Mr. Wentworth's moonlit stroll. Each narrative was carefully constructed, yet each contained omissions that now hinted at deeper lies. He decided to pursue two particular threads, the mysterious Dr. and the burned cards. First, he took the ledger page and examined the handwriting. The numerals were neat, but the letters Dr. were written in a spidery hand, different from Lord Ellington's bold script and unlike Mr. Marks's precise loops. He placed the sheet beside the paperweight again and studied both engravings. The paperweights D and R were ornate, interlaced, the ledgers plain. Someone had meant to echo those initials, but clumsily. He returned the page to his pocket and moved to the hearth. There, among the embers still glowing faintly, lay a half-burned scrap of paper. Kneeling, he retrieved it with gentle fingers. It bore the words Diana Radcliffe in fading ink. Poirot's heart quickened. Diana Radcliffe, Edward Ellington's cousin, had disappeared years ago under suspicious circumstances. Rumour held she had fled scandal, but no one had heard from her since. Had she returned in secret? Next, Poirot examined the burned cards. He laid them flat and held each to the light, inspecting the singed edges. He noted a faint fingerprint on the 8 of clubs. It had not been completely burned. Gloved, he lifted the card to the window. In the glare, the print was clearer, a slender fingertip, manicured neatly. Poirot frowned. None of the men could have left that print. The ladies, perhaps, but Lady Helena's nails were often painted a deep red, yet the print bore no polish. Miss Caldwell, the governess, kept her nails short and unadorned. Could the print belong to her? Poirot snapped his fingers. He would inspect Miss Caldwell's hands. But before doing so, he set a small trap. He wrote a formal note, inviting Miss Caldwell to provide further assistance in cataloguing Mr. Marks's personal papers. He sealed it and gave it to James to deliver at once. Meanwhile, Poirot summoned Mrs. Fairchild, the housekeeper, to the library. She arrived with prim composure, her bosom pinned with a simple gold brooch. Poirot greeted her kindly. "Mrs. Fairchild, I have a question that requires your discretion. I found this scrap of paper in the hearth." He handed her Diana Radcliffe. "Were you aware of any correspondence for this name?" Mrs. Fairchild stared. "Diana Radcliffe? No, monsieur. No letters arrived for her name in months. I would have noted it immediately, for her disappearance is still spoken of." "Indeed. Yet the paper was here, burned among Mr. Marks's waste." Poirot leaned closer. "Did you see anyone near the hearth yesterday who shouldn't have been?" The housekeeper shook her head. "Only the footman and Mr. Marks when I brought his evening tea." She wrung her hands. I can assure you no stranger entered." "Thank you, Mrs. Fairchild. You may go." As she left, Poirot murmured, "Diana Radcliffe, a red herring, perhaps. Or the key to the entire affair." Shortly thereafter, Miss Caldwell appeared in the library, summoned by Poirot's note. She looked nervous but composed, her grey eyes bright with curiosity. "Miss Caldwell," Poirot began, "thank you for coming. I wish to inspect your hands, please." He held up the burned 8 of clubs. "This card bears an imprint matching a neat manicure. May I see your fingertips?" Miss Caldwell extended her right hand hesitantly. Poirot studied them closely, unvarnished, short nails, cut evenly, an almost perfect match. But then he paused. The card's print seemed slightly elongated, the impression made by an index finger, whereas Miss Caldwell offered a slender little finger. He gently asked for her index finger, and the print was there. The two did not align. The card's print was larger still, perhaps the middle finger of a taller woman. He released her hand. "Thank you, madam. You may go." As she departed, Poirot sank into a chair to reflect. He had narrowed the burned card's owner to a woman, but neither Lady Helena nor Miss Caldwell matched precisely. And Diana Radcliffe, though suggested by the scrap, was unlikely, for no one admitted her presence. Poirot sensed the misdirection. Someone was weaving Diana's name into the fabric of the crime to divert suspicion. Late that afternoon, Poirot walked the gardens beneath a leaden sky. Wind-tossed leaves spiraled around his feet. He inspected the footprint by the French doors, a man's brogue, well worn, size 10 perhaps. He compared it to a brogue discarded by Captain Blackwood when he removed his shoes in the gallery. The sole pattern was similar, but the wear differed. Blackwood's pair bore a scuff at the outer arch. This print was pristine there. Not Blackwood, then. A visitor's brogue? Mr. Wentworth, perhaps? But the gentleman always wore polished leather shoes, not the rough brogues used on the gravel. He returned indoors and resolved to check the accounting books properly. Sitting at the desk, Poirot opened the ledger fully and examined entries preceding the torn page. He discovered a regular payment of £500 a fortnight, under Dr., paid into an account at a London bank. On inquiry, he learned the account belonged to a Miss Dorothy Rainsford, a name unfamiliar to the household. The coincidence of initials was almost too neat. Dorothy Rainsford, another Dr. red herring upon red herring. Poised at the precipice of frustration, Poirot rose. He would convene the household once more that evening. He realized that every clue so far had been carefully selected to mislead: Diana Radcliffe's scrap, the burned cards, the ledger's torn page, even the mud on the sill. Yet the very abundance of misdirection told him the murderer was hiding just beneath the surface, relying on Poirot's trust in what he saw rather than what was hidden. Poirot folded his hands behind his back and sauntered to the drawing-room, where each suspect would soon encounter subtle confrontations, a trap to lure the truth from their lips. Red herrings and half-truths abounded, but Poirot felt the tide turning. For every misdirection planted by his adversary, he had planted a countermeasure of his own. The subtle balance of evidence would soon tip in his favor, and when it did, the murderer would find the net closing with precision worthy of an artist's hand. The game continued, only the next move remained, and Poirot, ever the architect of revelation, was already several steps ahead. Chapter 5: Confrontations and Confessions. Late that afternoon, the sky above Hatfield Manor darkened with rolling clouds, and a damp wind rattled the leaded windows. Inside, the drawing-room was aglow with lamplight, its velvet drapes drawn tight against the chill. Lord Ellington and Lady Helena sat upon a chaise longue, exchanging worried glances. Captain Blackwood stood by the mantelpiece, arms folded, while Mr. Charles Wentworth paced near the window. Miss Beatrice Caldwell waited quietly in a corner, her posture composed yet tense. At the centre of these figures moved Hercule Poirot, his impeccable coat brushing the carpet as he surveyed each in turn. "Miss Amiss," he began in his soft French accent, clasping his hands behind his back, "I have combed the evidence and questioned you all separately. Now I shall speak with you one by one, in your presence, to observe your true reactions. Let us begin with you, Lady Helena." Lady Helena rose with graceful reluctance. Poirot led her to a small side table upon which lay the bronze paperweight. He lifted it gently and turned it over to reveal the faint Dr. engraving. "Madam, you claimed yesterday that this object belonged to no one but your husband or Mr. Marks. Yet its engraving bears initials unknown to either. Would you care to explain?" Lady Helena's hand flew to her throat. I have never seen this before, Monsieur Poirot. It cannot belong to me." "Indeed?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet Diana Radcliffe's name appeared, burned upon a scrap of paper in the hearth. "Diana is your cousin, is she not, Lady Helena?" Lady Helena's face paled. We were once close. But Diana left England nearly a decade ago, and we heard nothing of her until her name appeared in these ashes. Poirot placed the paperweight back on the table. Her disappearance was surrounded by scandal, debts, rumors of betrayal. Might she have entrusted someone here with this memento? He watched Lady Helena carefully, noticing her gloved hand tremble as she smoothed the drapes. Or might you, madam, have brought her to Hatfield in secret, perhaps under an assumed name? Lady Helena shook her head, lips pressed tight. I swear I know nothing of her return. Her voice quavered. Poirot inclined his head, making a note. Poirot moved to Captain Blackwood, who remained by the fire, his expression unreadable. Captain, you told me of a loan you sought from Mr. Marks, and yet the ledger shows fortnightly payments of £500 marked a DR. Did you ask him to arrange payments for another party? Blackwood's jaw stiffened. He glanced at the ledger page Poirot held between finger and thumb. I do not know what this means, he said, voice low. I borrowed money for my own debts. It was a private matter. Mr. Marks drew up the agreement. I never concerned myself with account headings. Poirot studied him. Yet, Captain, when I found embers of a cheroot in the hearth, you denied smoking one in the library. It is not possible to extinguish a cheroot without ash. I found yours here. He tapped the mantelpiece. You remembered too late. Blackwood's cheeks reddened. I confess I smoked, yes. But I did not kill Mr. Marks. I thank him for the loan arrangements, nothing more. Poirot nodded, though whether in acceptance or not, it was hard to say. He turned with a flourish toward Miss Coldwell. Miss Coldwell, you retrieved documents from Mr. Marks's briefcase and returned them unharmed. Yet the paperweight was moved, and he sat in darkness when you left. Poirot swept a slender arm to indicate the lamp on the side table. Did you notice the ink blotter overturned, the heavy lamp tilted? Miss Coldwell's eyes flooded with tears. She stood abruptly. Monsieur, I found the room like that. I did not touch anything. Mr. Marks asked for those papers, child's provisions, as you know. I gave them to him and left. Then I heard a thud. A thud, Poirot repeated, his tone gentle. Yes. A blow perhaps. He let her wobble for a moment, then placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You fear you may be suspected, but I believe your fear is innocent. Tell me, why did you not mention the small leather satchel you saw under the desk when you entered? Miss Coldwell glanced away. I thought it Mr. Marks's. I did not examine it. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But I glimpsed initials, C.W., and thought it belonged to Mr. Wentworth. Poirot withdrew his hand. Thank you, madam. That is most helpful. He made another note, then turned to Lord Ellington. Lord Ellington, Poirot said, you called me here urgently, in fear and in hope that I might solve this mystery. Yet you have been silent about a certain auction Mr. Marks attended last month, where he purchased a parcel of your family papers. Lord Ellington stiffened. It was a business matter, a matter of clearing old accounts. Some documents were surplus to requirements. Surplus, perhaps, until someone realized their value. Poirot stepped closer. The parcel contained letters between your late father and a woman known only as Dr. Letters of great import. Mr. Marks paid handsomely for them. It seems someone desired them more. Ellington swallowed. I was worried those letters might expose a scandal unfit for the family name. I asked Mr. Marks to secure them. And yet, Poirot continued, you did not foresee that such letters would become a motive for murder. He laid a gloved finger on the ledger page marked D.500, which he still held. These payments, of £500,000, were made for those letters. But why were they continued fortnightly? Lord Ellington's shoulders slumped. I cannot say. I trusted Mr. Marks's judgment. Finally, Poirot gazed at Mr. Charles Wentworth, who had been silent throughout. Mr. Wentworth, you have maintained that you strolled the grounds at night, yet Lady Helena heard footsteps near her window at 10:30. You deny it. Wentworth's dark eyes gleamed. I cannot account for noises Madame heard. But I was not near her wing. Poirot picked up the leather satchel Miss Caldwell had described. Its flap bore the initials CW in gilt. He opened it and displayed its contents, cancelled cheques for £500, addressed to Dr., and a photograph of Diana Radcliffe, slender and proud, wearing a riding habit. This, monsieur, is your satchel, is it not? Caught off guard, Wentworth stepped back. I borrowed it from Mr. Marks to carry the papers he gave me. Papers for what purpose? Poirot asked softly. Wentworth's hands clenched. To settle a debt of personal nature. I will admit I had dealings with Diana Radcliffe years ago. I wished to protect her. Poirot pressed on, and yet Diana Radcliffe has not been seen in England since her disappearance. These payments for letters and accounts, did you commission them? Wentworth's face crumpled. Yes. Yes, I paid Mr. Marks to gather any documents related to her life here, fearing blackmail if her secrets became known. Poirot's little grey cells ticked over. You paid Dr., you say. But these cheques are for Dr., not Diana Radcliffe. Who is the other? Wentworth closed his eyes. Dorothy Rainsford. Dr. stands for Dorothy Rainsford, my sister by birth, whom I raised when our parents died. A hush fell. None had spoken of Dorothy Rainsford. Wentworth's confession lay bare the tangled web of motives, family debts, concealed scandals, and purchased secrets. Yet none admitted to murder. Poirot surveyed the room. The embers in the hearth winked like knowing eyes. He held aloft the satchel's photograph. Here lies the core of the matter. A scandal long buried, a family torn, secrets sold for gold. Each of you had cause to seek these letters, therein lay your motive. But only one of you had the skill and the cruelty to strike the fatal blow. He paused, watching their faces. Lady Helena's cheeks were pale, Lord Ellington's brow furrowed, Captain Blackwood's jaw clenched, and Miss Caldwell's hand shook. Only Mr. Wentworth looked away, guilt heavy in his eyes. Was it you, Mr. Wentworth, who saw Mr. Marks destroy the page of ledger and then silenced him? Poirot's tone was gentle but firm. Wentworth lowered his gaze. No, it was not I. His voice cracked. I found him already on the desk. Poirot's gaze steeled. Then who? I believe we may learn more if you speak of the night in question without concealment. Wentworth inhaled sharply. Very well. I returned to the library after my stroll. I needed to speak further with Mr. Marks. I had hoped to save Diana from disgrace. Yet when I arrived, I saw her there, Diana. She stood beside his desk, sickly pale, with a riding crop in her hand. A collective gasp arose. Lady Helena's hand flew to her mouth. Miss Caldwell's eyes widened. Captain Blackwood straightened. Wentworth continued, voice low. She confronted him, shouting that he had betrayed her, sold her secrets. He begged her to calm down, but she struck him twice with the crop, struck him until he fell. In the struggle, the paperweight came loose and crashed down. I rushed forward, but she fled into the night through the window, leaving him dead. A silence more profound than any thunderclap filled the room. Poirot allowed the revelation to settle. Then he addressed Lady Helena. Madam, you heard footsteps at that hour. Lady Helena shook her head. It could not have been Diana, she was gone. Poirot turned to Captain Blackwood. You heard nothing? He bowed his head. Nothing. Poirot gazed at Miss Caldwell. Your rustle was Diana's struggle. Tears brimmed in her eyes. I thought it a book falling. Poirot folded his hands. Then we have our murderer, Diana Radcliffe, who remains at large, and the lesser crime committed here, concealment by those who loved her. Yet the guilt of this crime rests upon her shoulders. He stepped back. The police will be summoned. This household must now reckon with truths long hidden. As for us, Miss Amis, we conclude this chapter of tragedy. Tomorrow, we shall reveal all. Poirot turned away, letting the weight of the moment rest upon their silent forms, knowing the final act would bring justice at last. Chapter 6. The Crucial Clue. Late that same afternoon, Poirot returned to the library once more. The autumn light slanted low through the tall windows, gilding the edges of the fallen leaves on the lawn beyond. He placed upon the desk all the artifacts he had collected so far, the bronze paperweight engraved Dr., the burned Queen of Hearts and 8 of Clubs, the torn ledger page marked Dr. £500, the pair of charred card fragments, the half-burned scrap with Diana Radcliffe's name, and the assortment of footprints pressed from the mud outside the French windows. The tableau resembled an artist's palette of misdirection, but Poirot knew that one stroke would soon reveal the whole picture. He sat back, steepled his fingers, and allowed his mind to drift through every conversation, every glance, every tremble of his suspects. Each had motives: Lady Helena's fear of scandal, Captain Blackwood's desperation, Mr. Wentworth's secret debts, Miss Caldwell's reticence. Each had fabricated half-truths. Yet only one thread remained untugged. Poirot stood and crossed to the sideboard, where a small magnifying glass lay. He retrieved it and returned to the desk. First, he examined the paperweight. Though he had already noted its initials, he now focused on its patina, tiny scratches around the edge, as though it had been repeatedly handled and replaced, perhaps by someone nervous of leaving fingerprints. Next, he turned to the ledger page. The handwriting, he realized suddenly, varied subtly between the letters D and R. One stroke of the D was heavier, as though written by a different hand. He traced it with his fingertip. The writer was left-handed. Poirot's eyes brightened. Very few of the household were left-handed. He recalled his interviews. Captain Blackwood had shifted his cheroot in his right hand, Lady Helena had folded her fan in her right, Miss Caldwell offered her right hand when he inspected her nails, and Lord Ellington's handwriting on the summons letter had flowed evenly from the right. That left only one possibility, someone he had not yet scrutinized with that in mind: James Harrington, the footman. James had signed no documents, yet as a servant of long standing, he might well be left-handed. Poirot set aside the ledger page and inspected the boot print on the windowsill. The deep impression on the right side of the sole suggested a left foot leading, consistent with someone swinging out into the garden rather than entering. The muddle of footprints outside the French door showed one set heavier on the left side, indicating two people, one entering, one leaving. Perhaps James had entered uncertainly, then retreated hurriedly when he discovered the body, or perhaps someone had used his uniform to conceal their identity. A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. Mrs. Fairchild entered, clutching a small box. "Monsieur Poirot," she said in a low voice, "this arrived just now for you, by special courier." She handed him the box and withdrew. Poirot lifted the lid. Inside lay a slim leather-bound notebook, its cover monogrammed Dr. in the same ornate script as the paperweight. He lifted it reverently and opened the first page. The notebook's entries began in January of that year, penned in neat left-handed italic, details of meetings between Dr. and various contacts in London, references to OP and MB, notes on financial transfers, and, most curiously, a small pressed violet between pages 30 and 31. Digging deeper, Poirot found an entry dated 3 nights ago. Midnight. Met with Oliver Marks in library. Brought the packet and envelope as arranged. He questioned the authenticity. I assured him it was genuine. Must obtain final payment of £500. LP must not interfere. LP, Lady Helena? Of Lord Protector? Poirot murmured the initials aloud. Whoever LP was, they were seen as an obstacle. He turned further to find a later entry, in a hurried scrawl. Cannot wait. Will see him tonight at 11:30. Must have the letters, or he must perish. The paperweight will serve. A chill ran through Poirot's spine. This was a death warrant, penned in the hand of the murderer. And the writer was left-handed, monogrammed DR. That meant Diana Radcliffe, alive, present, and vengeful, or someone using her identity. But why send the notebook to Poirot? To taunt him? To draw attention away from the true culprit? Poirot replaced the notebook in its box and set it beside the paperweight. His mind raced. He had all he needed, the handwriting, the timetable, the motive, and the method. But could he trust the notebook's provenance? It might easily be a plant, designed to implicate DR while the real murderer remained unseen. He rose and proceeded to the gallery, where the pianoforte stood under a glass case. He lifted the lid and inspected the damp imprint of a single glove upon the keys, a glove too small for a man's hand. Inside the case was a folded piece of paper, a fragment of Diana's will, granting her cousin rights to her inherited property should she disappear. The date was 5 years ago, and the signature was unmistakable, Diana Radcliffe. Yet the fragment ended abruptly, suggesting the rest of the document was missing. Poirot's moustaches quivered. The torn will prove Diana Radcliffe had been erased from records long ago, but someone sought to resurrect her name now, perhaps to claim her inheritance. That inheritance might lie in the Hatfield estate itself, which had swelled considerably since Lady Helena's marriage. Was Lady Helena protecting her own claim? Had she struck out at Diana's memory by murdering Mr. Marks? But Lady Helena had alibis and no trace of left-handed writing. The notebook could have been forged. Poirot knew that notes alone would not suffice in court. He needed a living proof of the writer's presence in the house. He strode to the window, flung it open, and stepped onto the sill. Heart pounding, he lowered himself carefully to the garden below. The grass was wet and soft, footprints led away toward the old gardener's hut. Poirot followed the trail beneath a venerable oak, and there, tucked under a low branch, lay a single glove, its cuff embroidered with the initial B. Back inside, he placed the glove beside the notebook. B. Beath Coldwell? Blackwood? But neither fits left-handed script. He held the glove to his nose. A faint hint of tobacco lingered, cheroot. No, too sweet, perhaps the lavender of Miss Coldwell's sachets. He hurried back to the drawing-room, his mind alight. There he found Miss Coldwell sitting quietly, as though awaiting him. Poirot produced the glove and held it out. "Madam, would you recognize this glove?" Miss Coldwell's lips parted in surprise. That belongs to me, Monsieur Poirot. I lost it in the gallery." She rose, pale. "But I wore it only yesterday, this afternoon for my walk. I did not bring it back." Poirot inclined his head. "Indeed. Yet my concern is its presence here, beneath the oak, near the path you must have trodden." He paused, watching her fingers flutter. "Would you mind if I examine your handwriting? I must compare it to a certain notebook." Miss Coldwell's eyes widened. "My handwriting?" She hesitated. I suppose." Poirot retrieved a fresh sheet of paper and a pen. "Write the date and your full name, please." She did so with trembling strokes. Poirot both frowned and smiled. The loops of her left hand were too precise, too deliberate. But he compared them to the notebook's italic slant, they did not match. Miss Coldwell was right-hand after all, she wrote with her right. Yet the glove had her scent and initials. It had been used to frame her. Poirot folded the paper. "Thank you, madam." He bowed. "Your part in this is now concluded. You may rest." When she had departed, Poirot gathered all evidence once more: the glove, the notebook, the will fragment, the paperweight, the ledger page, and the card remnants. He left the drawing-room with a sense of urgent purpose. Tonight, he would set his final trap. He would call together Lord Ellington and his household and force the true culprit into a confession or an incriminating slip. As the dusk deepened and the manor's corridors fell silent, Poirot returned to his quarters and penned a brief note. To the household of Hatfield Manor. Please assemble in the library at 8 o'clock this evening. I have discovered a clue of the utmost importance, one which will illuminate the truth and decide the fate of us all. H. Poirot. He sealed it with a flourish and rang for George's. Have this delivered at once, mon ami. And prepare me a pot of Earl Grey, for tonight my little grey cells shall require sustenance. Georges bowed and left. Poirot looked out of his window at the lamplit grounds. Somewhere in the hush of Hatfield Manor, the murderer lurked, watching, waiting, perhaps dreading the coming hour. But Poirot, with his unerring insight, was ready. The crucial clue had been found. Now it remained only to reveal its meaning and unmask the killer before they could set another misdirection in motion. The trap was almost sprung. Chapter 7. The trap is sprung. That evening, a tense hush had fallen over Hatfield Manor. The great hall's lantern swung gently in a draught, casting long shadows that danced across the stone floor. At precisely 8 o'clock, the household gathered in the library: Lord Ellington, pale and composed, Lady Helena, gloved hands clasped, Captain Blackwood, erect as ever, Miss Caldwell, her gaze fixed upon the carpet, and Mr. Wentworth, in sober morning coat, his hat in hand. Even James Harrington and Mrs. Fairchild stood at the back, eyes downcast but keenly observant. At the head of the room, poised before the mantelpiece, stood Hercule Poirot, moustaches impeccably waxed and little grey cells aflame with anticipation. Miss Amos, Poirot began, his voice calm yet carrying to every corner, I thank you all for coming. I fear you have endured a most distressing affair, one that has shaken the tranquillity of this venerable house. Tonight, I shall reveal certain discoveries, clues overlooked by nearly everyone, which, when combined, paint a portrait of guilt. He inclined his head to James. James, if you please, arrange these objects upon the table here. The footman laid out, one by one, the bronze paperweight inscribed Dr., the leather-bound notebook, the torn ledger page marked Dr. £500, the pair of burned playing cards, the scrap bearing Diana Radcliffe, and the single lavender-scented glove. Poirot surveyed them with a satisfied nod. Let us begin with the simplest item, the glove, he said, picking it up delicately. This belongs to Miss Caldwell. He turned slightly as her colour rose, yet it was found beneath an oak on the grounds, where no governess should tread this evening. He let the silence grow. Miss Caldwell graciously provided her handwriting sample, which proved she is right-hand, yet the print upon the glove was made by a left-handed hand. Therefore Miss Caldwell cannot have lost this glove where it was found. The governess swallowed. Poirot laid the glove down and moved to the burned cards. Next, these half-charred cards, the Queen of Hearts and the Eight of Clubs. They were discovered in the hearth, smeared with ash but not entirely consumed. I compared the fingerprint on the Eight of Clubs to each of you. Only 2 of you have the long, slender middle finger capable of making this print. He paused, looking first at Lady Helena, then at Diana, then corrected himself. Pardon me, that should be 2 ladies. Yet only one sharpshooter of memory, Lady Helena, keeps her nails unvarnished as shown in the print. Miss Caldwell's hands were too small, and Mrs. Fairchild's hands show calluses unfit for such fine work. Therefore, Lady Helena could have handled these cards deliberately. Lady Helena clutched her fan. Poirot waited until she spoke, but she remained silent. He lifted the torn ledger page. Here we have a Dr. £500, torn from the accounting book. The handwriting is left-handed, and it does not match Captain Blackwood's or Lord Ellington's, but does match that of Mr. James Harrington, a left-handed man. James turned ashen. Why did you enter the library at midnight, James, and tear this page from Mr. Marks's ledger? James's hand shook. I did not. I only opened the door to call him for his tea, and I found the body. I swear I never disturbed any papers. Poirot inclined his head. Very well. Then someone donned your uniform, James, and entered unseen. Your innocence has been preserved by your own honest fear. He replaced the page. Now, the notebook. Poirot picked up the leather-bound volume stamped Dr. He flipped it open to the final entry. Tonight at 11:30, the paperweight will serve. Miss Caldwell told me she left the library at 10:30, he continued. Mr. Wentworth said he strolled the grounds until close to midnight. Captain Blackwood claims to have departed at midnight. Lady Helena played the piano until 10. Yet the murder occurred at precisely 11:30, according to both the stopped clocks and the witness Mr. Wentworth, who found the clocks when he entered the room. He let his gaze travel slowly around the circle. Only one among you needed the library at 11:30, and only one possessed the paperweight that struck Mr. Marks twice, upon the head and upon the desk, to conceal the blow. A heavy silence fell. Lady Helena's lips trembled, Captain Blackwood's face grew tight, Miss Caldwell's eyes welled, and Lord Ellington looked away. Mr. Wentworth alone met Poirot's eye. Poirot continued, the notebook was sent to me this afternoon by a special courier, bearing no return address. Why? To implicate a Diana Radcliffe as the culprit, yet all evidence points to a living person here. He tapped the paperweight. This object was handled repeatedly, as shown by the minute scratches around its edge, just enough to remove true fingerprints. He held it aloft. It was concealed by masking wax, then hastily revealed. At this, Lady Helena gasped softly, drawing Lady Ellington's attention. Poirot lowered the paperweight and set it down. Finally, he said, the ledger payments, fortnightly £500 to Dr. paid into an account belonging to Dorothy Rainsford, Miss Dorothy Rainsford being the long-lost daughter of Mr. Charles Wentworth. He fixed his gaze on Wentworth. Your sister, Dorothy, lived abroad under a false name to escape scandal. You paid Mr. Marks to retrieve family documents, letters and deeds, which would restore her inheritance. Yet you could not bear to see Mr. Marks destroy the ledger entry, so you intervened. Wentworth's lips parted, but he said nothing. Poirot's tone grew softer, more measured. Your love for your sister led you here at 11:30, under pretext of business. You donned James's coat to avoid detection, carried the paperweight, and struck Mr. Marks when he refused to reverse the destruction of the ledger entry. You then battered out the cards to create a diversion, set the hearth alight to consume evidence, and fled through the window, returning James's coat to the footman's room, and taking the glove to frame Miss Caldwell. Wentworth's shoulders sagged. He dropped his hat. It is true, he whispered, voice breaking. He would not restore the record. He said some secrets were better left buried. A collective gasp rippled around the room. Lady Helena covered her mouth. Captain Blackwood's arms dropped to his sides. Miss Caldwell trembled, tears in her eyes. Poirot inclined his head gravely. Yes, monsieur. You acted out of love and desperation. But love does not excuse murder. He stepped back. I shall inform the authorities. Your sister's inheritance may yet be secured by lawful means, but for tonight, justice will have its due. You are under arrest. As James stepped forward to secure the room, Poirot turned to the assembled household. You have all played your part well, but it is finished now. The game is over. Outside, the winds moaned around the eaves. Inside, the long night's tension dissolved at last into a heavy stillness. Hatfield Manor had yielded its secrets, and the trap was sprung. Tomorrow, the final reckoning would come, when every loose end would be tied, and the truth laid bare in full. Chapter 8: Revelation in the Drawing Room. The following morning, a brittle sun rose over Hatfield Manor, casting pale light through the library's tall windows. Outside, the dew still clung to the flowerbeds as if reluctant to let go of the night's chill. Inside, the assembled household, Lord Ellington, Lady Helena, Captain Blackwood, Miss Caldwell, Mrs. Fairchild, and James, stood in solemn silence. At the head of the room, Hercule Poirot arranged the last pieces of evidence upon the desk: the bronze paperweight Dr., the torn ledger page, the leather-bound notebook, the charred cards, the scrap of Diana Radcliffe's letter, and the single lavender-scented glove. Miss Amiss, Poirot began, his voice calm yet resonant, we have come to the final stage of this inquiry. Last night, in this very room, I revealed the method by which Mr. Oliver Marks met his end. Today, I shall show you the deeper currents that led to that moment, the hidden motives, the buried secrets, the tangled loyalties. He paused, permitting each to collect their thoughts. Then he picked up the torn ledger page. Let us recall why Mr. Marks kept this ledger. He was the custodian of your family's affairs, Lord Ellington, and he safeguarded letters and documents of great consequence. Among them were letters from your late father to Diana Radcliffe, letters that spoke of love, loss, and a hidden inheritance. When these letters came to light, certain parties wished them to vanish. He laid the page down and addressed Lady Helena. Madam, you feared the scandal those letters might ignite. You implored Mr. Marks to secure them, and indeed he did. But in doing so, you entrusted him with a secret that could unsettle your daughter's future and the reputation of this house. Lady Helena's gaze dropped to the floor. Poirot continued, turning to Captain Blackwood. Captain, your debt to Mr. Marks was personal but compelling. You borrowed heavily and repaid in installments marked to Dr., cloaking your identity behind the same initials. You believed no one would notice so long as the money flowed. Blackwood bowed his head. Poirot then faced Miss Caldwell. Miss Caldwell, you entered the library to retrieve documents concerning your charge. You saw a struggle, heard the thud of a blow, but you fled before you could discern the truth, fearing involvement. Miss Caldwell's voice trembled. I thought only to protect the child. And you did, madam, Poirot said kindly. Your conscience bore witness to the violence, though not to its cause. He allowed a moment of compassion before proceeding to Mr. Wentworth's sister, though she was absent, the very fact of her absence pivotal. Poirot swept his arm toward the leather-bound notebook. Diana Radcliffe was not truly lost, she lived abroad as Dorothy Rainsford. Mr. Wentworth, you ensured regular payments, £500 each fortnight, to Mr. Marks to recover your sister's letters. Yet you never planned murder, only revelation. He laid the notebook aside. But Diana feared exposure. She returned in secret, taking the paperweight inscribed with her initials. On the night of the murder, she confronted Mr. Marks. He balked at restoring the ledger entry that would reveal her identity. In rage and despair, she struck him twice with that paperweight. A hush fell. Mr. Wentworth, Poirot said softly, you discovered her fleeing through the window. You saw her cast off your sister's glove, hence its single presence near the oak, and you donned James's coat to clear your sister's tracks. You scattered the burned cards, symbols of chance and love, into the hearth to divert suspicion. You planted the scrap of her name among the embers. You hoped to redirect my attention to Diana Radcliffe, believing her absence would shield her. Lord Ellington's lips parted in shock. My cousin are alive, and in our house. Poirot inclined his head. Dorothy Rainsford, formerly Diana Radcliffe, sought refuge here. You all unwittingly aided her concealment, Lady Helena by silencing scandal, Captain Blackwood by unwittingly financing the recovery of documents, Miss Caldwell by retrieving papers without observation, James by his honest bewilderment, and Mrs. Fairchild by her routine. Poirot returned to the desk. Yet none of you struck the fatal blow. It was her, driven by fear. The left-handed notebook entries, the shattered ink bottle, the mud on the windowsill, the smudged ash of a cheroot, all point to her. He lifted the bronze paperweight. This object, carefully handled to mask fingerprints, served as both weapon and misdirection. He set it down and held up the ledger page. This page, torn by her hand, recorded the final payment she could no longer tolerate having erased. The broken ink bottle suggests his last protest. The footprint on the sill shows her exit route. Captain Blackwood exhaled. I heard nothing. Miss Caldwell whispered, I saw only a shadow. Understandable, Poirot said. Shock dulls senses. He turned to the only empty corner of the room, where Diana, alias Dorothy, might have stood. And now, we must find her. Poirot stepped aside, and two constables, summoned earlier, entered quietly. One produced a small note secured beneath the doorknob. I cannot remain. I will face justice in London. Leave the door unguarded. Poirot folded the note. She will be found soon enough. For now, let us ensure Mr. Marks's good name is restored. Lord Ellington stepped forward. Monsieur Poirot, you have been our salvation. Poirot demurred. I have only applied the little grey cells to the facts before me. The true tragedy lies in broken trust and concealed truths. Lady Helena placed a hand on her husband's arm. We must rebuild, for our daughter's sake. Poirot nodded. Yes. The estate's affairs should be reconciled transparently now. Letters to be published, documents to be archived, debts to be acknowledged. He handed the torn ledger page to Lord Ellington. This must be restored to the books, in full transparency. Turning to Miss Caldwell, Poirot smiled gently. You may resume your duties, madam, now that your conscience is clear. And to Captain Blackwood, he offered a nod of understanding. Your honourable conduct thereafter redeems much. Seek fair terms for your loan. Poirot then addressed the household as a whole. Hatfield Manor can now begin anew. The shadows lifted, the light restored. But remember, secrets, once unearthed, shape destinies. Better they emerge now than fester in silence. He paused, collecting his thoughts. In this room, Miss Amos, justice has been done, even if imperfect. Mr. Marks's memory shall be honoured, the guilty shall answer, and those who loved him shall carry forward his legacy of counsel and clarity. At that moment, a soft knock came at the door. The constables returned, escorting a dishevelled woman, her riding habit muddied, eyes defiant yet weary. 30 footsteps and a summons later, she stood before them, Dorothy Rainsford, alias Diana Radcliffe. She lifted her chin. I am ready. Poirot inclined his hat. Then let us conclude this chapter, for in endings reside new beginnings. And so, as the sun climbed higher, Hatfield Manor's secrets lay bare. Truth, like a polished gem, shone in every corner of the library. Loose ends, once knotted by fear and deceit, had been untangled by the detective's gentle persistence. The household, bruised but wiser, faced the future with honesty restored, thanks to the brilliance of Hercule Poirot, and the triumph of little grey cells over darkness and doubt.